Hi, welcome to Faber Booktime. My name is Emma Carroll and I'm the author of historical fiction stories for anyone really in the age range of 8 and 108. So if you like a spooky story, if you like an adventure, if you like a mystery, then maybe you might give one of mine a go. Who can say? So just to give you a little hint today as to which of my books I'm going to be talking about, I've got my trusty Lighthouse on the table next to me. So that might give you a little clue as to which book we're going to be focusing on today. But first of all, just a little bit of background so we can get to know each other. Okay, so let me show you a picture of me with a really dodgy haircut. So I'm about sort of 7 or 8 in that photo and seriously in need of a hairdresser. And when I was that age, I wanted to be an author. So it's a pretty long-term thing for me, really, wanting to be an author. And yes, there's not that much difference between those two hairstyles, is there? Anyway, so yes, I've always wanted to be an author, to be honest. It was one of those things that I never thought I'd be able to achieve. I always thought everybody else was better than me. And I think sometimes the more books you read, the more you convince yourself that everybody else is wonderful and you're a load of rubbish. What you've got to remember is that the books you read that you go into a bookshop and buy or borrow from your library are polished, edited versions of a story. They're not something that someone's just banged out on a computer. So bear that in mind as well. Don't be too hard on yourself if you're just starting out writing. There's a message for myself in there as well, actually. So I'm often asked by people when I do author events, what is my favourite book of all the books that I've written? In fact, I get asked that an awful lot, and I always say, oh, it's such a hard question to answer, because it is, because every book you write is a very personal thing. But you'll notice that I did choose the old Lighthouse story to talk to you about today. It is a very, very special book for me. I got the idea for writing it from my mother-in-law, who was an evacuee herself from the East End of London, so that kind of triggered it off for me. I was also writing it at a time when there was a lot about refugees in the news, coming out of Syria, and that reminded me a little bit of how we treated people moving away from their homes during wartime, during the Second World War. So I felt there was a parallel between those two situations that I wanted to kind of explore. So it is a very special book to me. And the other one, of course, my debut book, Frost Hollow Hall, that'll always have a special place in my heart because it's the one that made the dream come true. Hey, the other question that we asked. What's the funniest thing anybody's ever asked you? Well, you get asked quite a lot of interesting things, shall we say, when you go and do festivals and school events. And I quite like that, to be honest. I like a funny question. Probably the most bizarre, random question I got asked was by somebody once who asked me what my thoughts on hamsters. This boy was a real hamster buff, and he was deadly serious about it. What are my thoughts on hamsters? Well, now that did throw me a little bit. I think I said, as an animal lover, very, very fond of hamsters. I think hamsters have their place. But yeah, that was probably the strangest thing I've ever been asked. What are my thoughts on hamsters? So I've been asked to talk about what my favourite breakfast food is. Well, those of you who've heard me talk before may have heard me mention this delightful treat. I have one here earlier, actually, that I have prepared in my kitchen. And my favourite thing to have on toast is Marmite. So you've got butter on the toast underneath there. If I can just lift up a bit of cucumber there. We've got Marmite under the toast. We've got peanut butter and we've got cucumber. And let me tell you, I'm just going to have a little bite. Just to prove to you I'm not making it up. Delicious. And it's so delicious that I've been followed in here by one of my dogs, who is staring at me very longingly for a little mouthful. So there we go. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do is read you a little extract from Letters from the Lighthouse, and then I'm going to set you a little challenge that's based on the passage that I'm going to read. What's Letters from the Lighthouse all about then? Well, it's about some children who are evacuated from the East End of London in the spring of 1941, and they end up living in a village called Budmouth Point, which is a fictional village on the coast of South Devon. The bit I'm going to read you is from a chapter called Lend a Hand on the Land, because each chapter heading has a phrase taken from a World War II propaganda poster. So this is about the first day, really, or the first couple of days that Olive and Cliff are living in Budmouth Point. And they're living at the moment with a lady called Queenie. She gets them to work very quickly, and this is Olive's account of what she kind of experiences during that first day. Okay. That morning I started my delivery job. In daylight, Budmouth Point looked prettier than I'd supposed. It wasn't a dump like Esther had said. There was a school, a church, a baker's shop, rows of little white cottages set in the hillside. Most of the larger houses were on the main street, which ran steeply down to a harbour. Beyond it, perched at the end of a long cobbled wall, was the Lighthouse. I was to take groceries and post to those who, for whatever reason, couldn't collect it themselves. Cliff, being younger and weedier, was to help serve customers in the shop. Queenie made him wear an apron that fell to his ankles, while I had to carry a leather delivery bag. She told us that though today was our first day, she'd expect us to be as quick as the Jensen boys had been, because customers couldn't be kept waiting. Before I went, she gave me 2 extra bits of advice. The first was, ignore people if they stare. It's the Budmouth way. I've lived here all my life and they still gawp at me like I'm an intruder. I wondered if it had more to do with her sweaters. And, she added, if you've ever reason to be on the beach, don't go past the last groin. She meant one of those wooden fence things that ran out into the sea. Why not? Cliff asked. Quicksands. They'll swallow you whole before you've had chance to even scream. It's a far worse death than drowning in the sea, so people say. Cliff's eyes went owl wide. Wow! As he turned to me, I guessed what he was about to ask. No, we're not going down there. Don't even think about it, I told him firmly. Delivering was surprisingly hard work. By the end of the first day, my calf muscles ached like mad, but it was a great way to get to know the layout of the village. At supper, bread and dripping, only 1 slice each, Queenie told me I was indeed as fast as the Jensen boys. Then she left us to clear away, so I didn't get a chance to ask about Suki. After we'd done the dishes and were up in the attic by ourselves, I decided to show Cliff the coded note. We were sitting cross-legged on my bed. It was dark by then, and the torch batteries were on the blink, but we could just about see the numbers and letters on the page. Cliff bent over the note eagerly, though it gave me a bad feeling, seeing it again, because I was sure it had something to do with Suki's disappearance. Tatty, isn't it? Cliff remarked. It got wet in the air raid, I explained. What do you think it says? It's not another love letter, is it? He said, holding it at arm's length. Funny sort of love letter if it is, I remarked. Well, it's not telephone numbers, he said, or place names. I didn't think so. Really, Cliff had no more idea than I had. It's probably just a silly joke she had with one of her friends, I decided. And taking the note from him, I hid it at the very back of my sock drawer, though that didn't stop it troubling me. You've an extra package today, Queenie told me on Friday, slipping a small package into the bag. Chicken for Mrs. Drummond of 4 Salters Terrace. Tell her it's all I could get, though it might not be right. That's the very top of the village, isn't it? I asked, just to check. As the week had gone on, I'd got to know my way around the back lanes and cut-throughs. I had the sense Queenie was getting to know us too. Begrudgingly, and rather badly, she'd even started cooking for us. Yet, apart from mealtimes, I didn't see that much of her. She'd either be in the shop or down in the cellar. And when I tried asking about my sister, she'd stare at me blankly as if she'd forgotten who Suki was. Other times she'd cut across me with some delivery detail or job that needed doing. That Friday morning was a case in point. Mrs. Drummond will need to return yesterday's bacon. All right? Dr. Morrison's housekeeper says she'll have it on a meat ration. If you could take it round there, please. Not wanting to carry it all the way round, I left Mrs. Drummond's delivery until almost last. The hill leading up from the village was long and steep, but well worth the climb. The view from the sea was spectacular from up here. And as I walked the final steps backwards, just to savour it, I saw the lighthouse painted in red and white stripes. It looked like something from a fairground. Even without its light on, it stood out for miles against the grey rocks and the dark sea. But then I suppose that was the idea, which was why recently German pilots had taken a liking to it. As they often did when I was tired, my thoughts took a turn. Perhaps, like the lighthouse, there were people who were meant to stand out, who were meant to be noticed and make a difference. Brought me slap bang back to Suki. All week I'd savoured doing the delivery round as a time when my brain went blissfully blank. And yet back at Queenie's I'd looked at Suki's notes so many times the paper was wearing thin. It had to be a secret of some sort. Why else would it be written in code? I'd no idea. My sister had liked raspberry jam on toast and left long brown hairs in our sink that blocked the plug hole. She slept late on Saturdays, turned the wireless up loud when a dance tune came on. But when I thought of her now, it was like there was this whole other Suki I didn't know. It frightened me. Taking a deep breath, I turned away from the sea. Salter's Terrace was easy to spot. It was the last row of stone cottages in Budmouth Point. To my surprise and dismay, standing outside number 4 was Esther Jenkins. She was leaning against the wall, one leg tucked up behind her. Her face was blotchy, like she'd been crying again. I wanted to ask if she was all right, but she looked so awfully fierce I didn't have the nerve. "Can you give this to Mrs. Drummond, please?" I asked, hating how small I sounded. I held out the parcel of chicken. "Give it to her yourself," Esther said flatly. "The old witch is inside." I stared at her, appalled but a little bit impressed. Then I noticed the suitcase on the doorstep, a school blazer and a hat slung across it. "Are you staying here?" I asked. "Not if I can help it, no." Snatching up her things, Esther disappeared off down the hill. Mrs. Drummond came to the door almost straight away. I recognised her from the village hall the other night. She was the woman who'd stayed with Esther while she cried. "That girl is impossible," she sighed, gazing past me into the street. "Where's she gone? Did you see her?" She just went off. I wasn't sure what else to say. "Here's your delivery from the shop, and Queenie says, can you return yesterday's bacon?" "Right you are, 'tis a shame to waste it." Taking the chicken, she turned to go back inside for the bacon. But something caught her attention and she froze. "Listen to that," she said, finger raised. "Planes." I frowned. "Planes? What, like aeroplanes?" "German ones, I'll bet you, on their way to bomb poor old Plymouth again." Mrs. Drummond was right. There on the wind was the unmistakable drone of aircraft. A familiar dread grew in the pit of my stomach. I'd better go," I said, and hurried away, anxious to find Cliff. So now it's your turn to start using your imaginations. So what I want you to think about is, imagine you are delivering things to people that you know and maybe haven't been able to see because of this lockdown situation we're in currently. So I want you first of all to think of maybe half a dozen people or more who live around, somewhere around where you live, and plot out on a map, draw the map, where those people live and the sort of journey you might take in order to go and deliver something to them. I want you to also think about what you would take them. What one thing would they really, really like? What would make a difference to them if you could take them that one thing? Okay, so that's my first activity. Obviously, this is all about using your imagination. It's not about going out. It's not about going delivering things to people. Bear that in mind, this is all imaginary. The second task for you is a longer writing task where I want you to think about somebody you haven't spoken to over the last couple of weeks because of, again, the situation we're in, and I want you to write them a letter. So telling them what you've been up to, telling them what your thoughts are about this situation, how it's making you feel, what maybe you'll do when you see them again, all those sorts of things. So it could be a grandparent, it could be a cousin, it could be a friend, it could be your teacher from school, it could be somebody in your class from school. And if you have a post box that you pass when you're out doing your exercise every day, maybe you could actually send that letter. Okay, so that's your writing task from me. So thank you very, very much for tuning in, and look after yourselves, stay safe, keep washing the old hands, and see you all soon.